Dragon King Soren Kade ordered Brinna Vale's ash survey stakes pulled from the Dragonstone Ridge 1 hour before the dedication rite, while every noble family watched from the marble terraces and pretended not to see her hands shake. The stakes had never been beautiful. They were black ashwood, wrist-thick, charred at the tips, carved with survey notches and tied with old red cord. Brinna had driven them into the ridge through rain and furnace smoke, measuring foundations by lamp, heel bone, and the hollow answer beneath stone. To the court, they looked like scars. Royal Surveyor Caldron Voss called them exactly that. Scars on His Majesty's mourning, he said, his polished brass rod tucked beneath one arm. Anxious markings from a woman who confuses old ash beds with living fault lines. A few nobles laughed, because the palace behind them gave permission to laugh. It rose in white terraces and black dragon glass, its western wing bright with dedication banners. Below the terrace, a worker passed through the lower service mouth carrying dedication oil. The copper jars on his shoulder trembled once. Dust slipped from the arch above him and vanished into his hair. He looked up, then kept walking because no servant stopped a royal mourning for stone dust. Brinna saw it. So did Caldron. The ridge shifted again before dawn, she said. Caldron smiled. The ridge settled. There is a difference. There is, Brinna answered. That is why I measured it. Her voice did not rise. In the worker tunnels below the western wing, men were carrying oil past walls that had begun to breathe dust. Brinna had marked the danger line before sunrise. Caldron had ordered it covered with ceremonial gravel before the nobles arrived. Soren stood at the terrace head in black coronation armor, scaled like a sleeping dragon. His ember-gray eyes passed once over Brinna's muddy hem, once over the stakes, and once over Caldron's clean gloves. That last glance almost gave her hope. Almost. Your Majesty, Caldron said, bowing with practiced sorrow, the rite cannot begin while false boundary marks remain on royal ground. Ash survey law does not outrank a palace approved by Crown Seal. Brinna turned to Soren. It outranks stone that moves. Caldron's hand tightened on his brass rod. Not much. Enough. You were dismissed from the Ridge survey at third bell, he said. You no longer speak as royal measurewoman. Then I speak as the person who knows where the lower tunnels crack. The laughter stopped too quickly. Soren's gaze sharpened. What tunnels? Caldron stepped between them like a man closing a ledger before anyone saw the wrong column. Old service runs, reinforced, inspected. Her fear has become a performance, Majesty. She chose the dedication hour and the noble terraces because public alarm gives a dismissed servant more power than lawful office ever did. Brinna felt the court accept that shape. It was cleaner than calling her mad. It made her dangerous. She had learned long ago that men called a woman theatrical when her numbers frightened them. She drew one folded strip of ash paper from her sleeve. One evacuation bell. Clear the lower runs, then build your speeches over whatever stone you like. Caldron's smile stayed. His eyes did not. You ask the Dragon King to shame his own palace before the houses that funded it. No, Brinna said. I ask him not to bury the people who built it. The wind went thin. Soren looked at her then, not as a dismissed servant, but as a woman who had just offered him one clean chance to be better than his crown. For the first time, he moved. Only one step, but his shadow crossed the first stake. Heat crawled along the carved notches as if the ashwood recognized dragon blood near it. Brinna saw it. So did Caldron. He struck first. Remove them, Caldron ordered, before she turns a lawful rite into panic. Two guards hesitated, looking to the king. Soren's jaw hardened. His trusted surveyor had given him clean maps, clean seals, clean words. Brinna had mud on her boots and ash under her nails. For one breath, his gaze dropped to the service mouth below. Another thread of dust fell from its arch. Brinna did not speak. She only watched him watch it. Something in Soren's face closed. He had seen enough to doubt. Not enough to surrender a royal mourning before the families who had bought his western wing. Pull the stakes, Soren said. The order landed harder than any insult. Brinna gripped the first stake before a guard could touch it. If you pull it, do not burn it. Caldron's voice cut in. Ash survey stakes are void once removed. Not if the ground is still speaking. That is superstition. That is law older than palace stone. The guard reached for her wrist. Soren's voice cracked across the terrace. Do not bruise her. It was not belief, it was not rescue, but the guard's hand opened, and Brinna kept her skin. Then the stake came free. The mountain exhaled. A deep, inward sigh moved beneath the terrace, and every dragon-glass window in the western wing clouded from within. The pulled stake smoked in the guard's fist. Its red cord snapped straight toward the palace wall. Cauldron bowed his head as if grief had overcome him. Majesty, this is precisely why unlawful ridgecraft is forbidden during crown rites. She has frightened the ground into answering. Brinna looked at him. Ground does not frighten. The court heard your threat. I gave a measurement. The court heard you promise burial. That was how he did it. Not with shouting, with polished words placed where fear could use them. The second stake tore itself from the ground before anyone touched it. Then the third. Then the rest. All along the ridge, Brinna's black stakes rose from the soil one by one, floating upright behind her like accusations the mountain had been holding in its teeth. Their carved notches burned orange. Their shadows stretched not across the ground, but up the palace walls. Lines of fire followed. They ran over white marble, through dedication banners, across dragon glass windows, cutting bright survey marks where Brinna's map had warned of pressure. One crossed the western noble balconies, one split the ceremonial stair, one burned beneath Soren's terrace and vanished toward the worker tunnels. The court screamed then. Soren did not. He stared at the burning lines as if the mountain had reached through stone and corrected his signature. Brinna stepped away from the guards. The floating stakes turned with her. Ring the lower evacuation bell, she said. Cauldron lifted his brass rod toward her. Seize her before she collapses the royal wing to prove herself right. Soren looked from Cauldron's steady rod to the line burning beneath his own boots, then to the service mouth where the dedication oil jars had begun to knock against one another in the dark. No one moved. The mountain sighed again. This time the terrace answered with a crack. Below the western terrace, the first oil jar fell. It struck the tunnel floor with a copper scream, split at the seam, and sent dedication oil running black over the worker stones. A man shouted from below. Then another. Then came the sound every ridge worker knew better than bells. Stone grinding against stone, slow enough to be real, and deep enough to mean the mountain had not finished speaking. Brinna was already moving. Lower evacuation bell, she said. Now. A guard blocked the stair by habit, not courage. Brinna looked at the burning line cutting beneath his boots. That mark crosses the oil run. If flame reaches it, the workers die first and the royal wing dies after. The guard's face emptied. Cauldron's brass rod snapped across the stair mouth. No one descends. Unauthorized movement below a dedication platform is punishable as sabotage. Workers leave before nobles when ground opens beneath load-bearing stone, Brinna said. Cauldron turned to the court with terrible patience. Panic drops jars. Panic makes servants run. Panic kills more cleanly than stone. It was clever, clean. He made rescue sound like murder. Soren stood over the spreading line of fire in his own terrace stone. The black scales of his armor caught the glow and turned red at the edges. Behind him, noblewomen clutched pearl collars. Lords dragged their sons away from cracks, while still pretending not to retreat. From below came a second crash. Then a worker screamed a name. Marek. Brinna's face changed only in the smallest way. Soren saw it because he was watching her now. Not trusting, not forgiving. Watching as if every expression she refused to show was becoming a second map. You know him? He asked. I know the tunnel count, she said. There were 26 below at sunrise. If oil crews joined after third bell, there are at least 32. Cauldron cut in. She was dismissed at third bell. Any count after that is trespass knowledge. Brinna reached for the ash paper in her sleeve. Cauldron moved faster than grief, faster than fear. Secure her map. 2 guards stepped toward her. Soren's hand lifted. They stopped. He did not look gentle. He looked furious at the shape of his own hesitation. Ring the lower bell, he said. The command cracked through the terrace. Cauldron's face did not change, but his fingers whitened around the brass rod. Majesty, that bell admits the palace is unsafe before dedication witnesses. Soren looked down at the burning survey line beneath his boots. Then let the witnesses hear what I refuse to hear. A bellman sprinted toward the lower tower. Cauldron swung his rod into the man's path. By right authority, I countermand. Soren caught the brass rod in one armored hand. The terrace went still, except for the mountain's low breath. "You do not countermand me while men are under my floor," Soren said. For one heartbeat, Cauldron looked less like a royal surveyor and more like a man who had almost lost something hidden. Then the lower evacuation bell rang. Its sound rolled through Dragonstone Ridge, iron and ugly and alive. Workers spilled from the service mouth below the terrace, coughing dust, dragging one another by belts and collars. A boy, no older than 16, came out with oil across his sleeves. Two kitchen girls carried a limping mason between them. Behind them, the tunnel darkness breathed gray. "Clear every lower run before a single noble crosses the terrace," Soren ordered. Brinna counted aloud. 4, 7, 9. No one else understood at first. 13, she said. 16, 19. The floating stakes turned with each number, their burning notches dimming as bodies crossed the danger line alive. Soren had heard generals count victories with less precision than Brinna Vale counted servants coming out of the dark. 24, Brinna said. A crack snapped above the service arch. Dust poured down like ash. The crowd surged backward. Cauldron used the movement to reach for Brinna's sleeve. His fingers caught the folded ash paper. Brinna twisted, but not away, toward him. The ash paper tore open between them. For one bright second, the court saw her map, the lower tunnels, the western noble footings, the old boundary marks, and one red line drawn beneath the dedication terrace. Cauldron slammed his thumb over a small square seal near the western wing. Brinna saw what he covered. So did Soren. "What is that mark?" the Dragon King asked. Cauldron's smile returned too quickly. "A private construction notation, irrelevant to evacuation." Brinna's voice was cold. "No, that is a sold foundation block." Soren's grip tightened on the brass rod. "Explain." "That block should have been empty stone," Brinna said. "Someone sold weight, bearing mountain ground as noble balcony space." The noble houses on the western side stopped retreating, not because they were brave, because they had just heard the price of their view. Cauldron made a soft sound of offense. "A dismissed measurewoman cannot accuse crown-approved architecture with torn field paper." "She can count living men," Soren said. "Open the construction ledger." Cauldron's eyes flicked once toward the western stair. "Too fast. Majesty, in this instability, records should be secured." "Then secure them in my hands." The last worker stumbled from the tunnel mouth just as the service arch folded inward behind him. The mountains swallowed the passage in a roar of dust. When the gray cloud cleared, every burning stake had turned its point toward Cauldron's brass rod. The brass rod began to smoke in Soren's hand. Heat climbed through Cauldron's brass rod until Soren's gauntlet hissed. The royal surveyor tried to pull it back. Soren did not let go. A thin line of smoke curled between the king's armored fingers, carrying the bitter smell of hot metal and cold soot. The nobles nearest the western terrace stepped away, as if guilt could travel by heat. Cauldron's face stayed composed, but his right eyelid twitched once when the floating ash stakes lowered their burning points toward the rod. "Release my instrument, Majesty," Cauldron said carefully. "It is calibrated for royal measure. Dragon heat will damage the markings." Brinna looked at the rod, not at him. "It is not dragon heat." Cauldron's smile thinned. "You were dismissed from royal measure." The mountain was not. The rod smoked harder. Beneath the polished brass, a hidden seal began to show. At first it was only a dull square, darker than the rest of the metal. Then ashlight filled its edges. 4 short lines crossed at the corners, bent inward toward a hollow center. The same mark Brinna had seen on the torn ash paper. The same mark Cauldron had covered with his thumb. Soren saw it. The terrace saw him see it. "What seal is that?" he asked. Cauldron's voice softened into injured patience. "A construction notation, Majesty. Survey rods carry dozens of them. Field servants often mistake professional marks for law." Brinna stepped closer to the line burned into the terrace floor. The stakes shifted behind her, their cords pulling toward her like red veins. "That is not a construction notation," she said. "It is a survey override seal." Several clerks near the dedication platform turned pale. Cauldron did not look at them. "An obsolete term." "No," Brinna said. "A forbidden one." The court's silence changed shape. Brinna pointed to the hollow center of the mark. "It does not approve building. It tells a ledger to treat hollow ground as weight-bearing stone. That is an outrageous simplification. It is a precise one. Below them, more workers were spilling from side mouths along the lower ridge. Soren looked to Brinna before he looked to the nobles, and the court saw the choice before he spoke it. Clear the eastern storage runs and the south furnace crawl, he ordered. Workers first. Nobles remain above the marked line until I say otherwise. A lord, in a blue mantle, protested, Majesty, my family's apartments are in the western wing. Then your family will stand where the ground still agrees to hold you. It was harsh enough to stop argument. Not kind, not penitent, useful. Brinna marked that and nothing more. Cauldron's gaze flicked to her sleeve again. The torn ash paper hung from her fingers, split across the western footing but still readable. His left hand moved as if to steady himself on the king's arm, then darted instead toward the paper. Soren shifted the brass rod across Cauldron's path. The surveyor stopped before touching the king. Do not reach for her map again, Soren said. Cauldron inhaled once through his nose. Majesty, that paper has been contaminated by unlawful ash reaction. If entered as evidence, it may compromise the rite, the ledgers, and every noble title attached to the western expansion. There, Brinna said. Soren's eyes cut to her. She did not smile. That is what he is protecting. Cauldron turned to the crowd. I am protecting lawful property from a dismissed servant who has already frightened the lower runs into collapse. The accusation landed where he wanted it. Not on truth, on ownership, on balconies, apartments, inheritance rooms, view rights, dowry clauses, noble pride built over stone that should never have been sold. Brinna held up the torn ash paper with 2 fingers, then opened the construction ledger. Cauldron bowed to Soren. In controlled chambers. No, Brinna said. Here. A few nobles hissed. She turned the paper toward the burning terrace line, at the boundary mark. If the ledger is clean, the ash stakes will go dark. If it carries the same override seal, the mountain will answer. Cauldron's fear tell was small. His thumb pressed against the smooth side of his brass rod, exactly where the hidden seal burned. Soren felt the motion through the metal. His eyes lowered to Cauldron's hand. The royal surveyor went still. Bring the construction ledger, Soren ordered. No one moved. Then an old record clerk stumbled forward from behind the dedication canopy, clutching a black-bound volume against her chest. Her hair was powdered with stone dust, and her lips trembled. She kept one hand pressed over the archive key at her throat, as if Cauldron could still take it from her. Majesty, she whispered. The Western ledger was removed from archive before dawn. Cauldron's head turned slowly. Careful, Mistress Hale. The clerk flinched at her own name. Brinna looked at her. Who signed it out? Mistress Hale swallowed. No name, only a rod impression. The brass rod screamed. Not like metal, like stone, under too much weight. The hidden seal burned white beneath Soren's fist. Across the palace wall, the fire lines changed direction. They no longer climbed upward like cracks, searching for air. They bent sideways, all of them, toward the western wing. Brinna's blood went cold. Move everyone off the west load, she said. Soren turned. How long? She looked at the balconies, the false footings, the noble wing gleaming over hollow ground. Not long enough for argument. The mountain breathed once beneath the palace. Then the western wing shifted. The western wing shifted with the sound of a giant turning in sleep. Not falling. Not yet. Its black glass balconies dipped an inch toward the ridge drop, and that single inch made noble blood forget ceremony. Women screamed. Men shoved backward with their rings cutting into one another's sleeves. A silver breakfast tray slid from a balcony table and fell 3 stories before striking the terrace below like a bell rung for the dead. Back from the west line, Soren ordered. No one crosses it. A lord tried anyway, his face white beneath powdered pride. My daughter is in the west solar. Brinna looked at the burning lines on the palace wall. They had bent into a shape only surveyors feared. Not a crack path, but a load transfer map. The west solar is not the next failure. The lord stopped. Soren turned to her. Where? She pointed to the lower diagonal cutting beneath the carved dragon stair. There. The stair is carrying weight. It was never meant to carry. If it splits, the workers exiting the south furnace crawl will be buried. Soren's face hardened into command. Clear the south crawl. Shield line at the dragon stair. Workers first. Anyone who blocks them answers to me. Cauldron gave a sharp, controlled laugh. Majesty, if the western wing falls, every noble family will blame the woman who rang the bell. Brinna did not answer him. That unsettled him more than anger would have. She went down on one knee beside the cracked terrace, pressed 2 fingers to the ash dust shaking out of the seam, and watched which way it crawled. The dust did not scatter in the wind. It dragged east, grain by grain, toward the stair footing. 3 braces, she said. Oak if they have it, iron if they do not. Set them under the second stair throat, not the first. A mason captain below looked up through dust. Who commands that? Soren did not look away from Brinna. She does. No apology, no softness, only authority placed where it should have been before stone began to move. The mason captain ran. Cauldron used the motion around them to retreat half a step toward the western archive stair. Soren still held the smoking brass rod. Do not leave, the king said. I am retrieving the ledger you demanded. The clerk said it was removed, to secure it from contamination. Brinna rose. By rod impression, the hidden seal on the rod pulsed white. Cauldron's mouth tightened. A rod impression is valid when the royal surveyor acts under crown expansion authority. Not for load reassignment, Brinna said. Mistress Hale, still clutching the archive key at her throat, made a small frightened sound. Cauldron's eyes cut to her. Record clerks should not interpret field law in public. She does not need to, Brinna said. The mountain already did. The western wing groaned again. This time, a strip of white plaster broke from the inner wall above the dedication canopy. It struck the marble and shattered. Behind it, something older showed through the palace skin, a black ridge, stone plate set deep into the foundation, carved in heavy survey script, nearly hidden by lime wash. Brinna Vale still. Soren saw the stillness before he read the words. What is it? She crossed to the exposed plate. Cauldron moved too fast. Unstable wall, he snapped. Step away from it. Brinna brushed broken plaster from the carving with the side of her hand. Reserve void. No crown load. The words were old. Older than the western wing. Older than Cauldron's polished maps. The plate had not been made to decorate a palace. It had been placed to warn anyone honest enough to leave empty ground empty. A hush spread over the terrace. Cauldron recovered first. An ancient quarry notice. Irrelevant. The foundation was reinforced by later crown works. Then the ledger will show the reinforcement, Brinna said. It would, if panic had not scattered half the archive. No, Mistress Hale whispered. Every head turned. The old clerk's face crumpled under attention, but her hand stayed over the key. The archive did not scatter. The western ledger was taken before dawn. I told Master Voss the removal required a name. He pressed the rod to the registry and said the king's dedication authority was name enough. Cauldron's composure flashed with anger. You misremember fear. I remember impressions, Mistress Hale said, almost too quietly to hear. That is my office. The brass rod screamed again in Soren's hand. The burning ash stake swung from Cauldron toward the exposed ridgestone plate, then back to the rod, as if drawing a line only fools could still deny. Brinna looked at Soren then, not kindly, not pleading. The western load was reassigned from empty ground to royal trust. Soren's eyes did not leave the old warning plate. Royal trust. His seal, his expansion, his mourning. The realization crossed his face like a crack no crown could hide. Cauldron saw it and struck. Majesty, he said, loud enough for the noble families to cling to him. If you let a dismissed ash woman define royal trust, every balcony, title, and marriage contract in the western wing becomes suspect. She is not saving your palace. She is unmaking your reign. The south furnace crawl collapsed inward below them. A plume of ash burst from the lower ridge. Then, through the gray, came a child's cough. A mason dropped his brace at the sound from below. Brinna caught the oak beam before it struck the cracked stair and shoved it back into his hands. Under the second throat, now. The man blinked through ash. There's someone in the crawl. There are at least 3. She pointed to the seam beneath the dragon stair. If that line opens, the stair comes down on them. Soren's command followed hers without pause. Shield bearers to the stair. Masons brace where she marks. No noble moves west until every lower voice answers. A duchess cried. My rooms are above that wing. Then they will remain empty, Soren said. Brinna was already at the collapsed crawl mouth. Smoke and stone dust rolled over her boots. The opening was half its former height, jagged with broken black rock. Inside, someone coughed again, higher and smaller than the workers' voices. Cauldron seized on it. "You hear that?" he called. "This is what panic has done. Children dragged into serviceways, workers running blind. A royal evacuation turned into chaos by a woman with no authority to ring that bell." Brinna looked into the crawl, not at him. "Children carry polish cloths before rites. You know that." His mouth closed for half a second. "Enough." Soren saw it. Brinna pressed the torn ash paper flat against the exposed ridgestone plate. The paper did not burn. It darkened around the old words, and the red cord still tied to one floating stake stretched toward her wrist. Cauldron stepped forward. "Do not touch Crown Foundation with contaminated field paper." Brinna spoke into the crawl. "If you can hear me, tap stone twice." 2 faint taps answered. The court went quiet for the first honest reason all morning. "Good," Brinna said. "Do not crawl toward my voice. Crawl away from the cold air. This opening is carrying stair weight." Soren moved beside her, close enough that the heat of his armor pressed through the ash haze. "Can we cut through?" "No. Cutting makes the stair drop." "Then how?" She pointed to the old plate. "Unload the false line." Cauldron laughed, too sharp. "There is no false line. There is damaged stone, hysteria, and a dismissed woman speaking as if the mountain made her queen." Brinna finally turned to him. "The mountain does not make queens," she said. "It keeps witnesses." The floating stake struck the terrace all at once. Not hard enough to break stone, hard enough to make every noble feel the blow in their teeth. Each stake landed along one burning survey line, and each red cord pulled taut toward the exposed ridgestone plate. Mistress Hale gasped. "Old witness array." Cauldron wheeled on her. "Silence." Soren's voice was colder. "Let her speak." The clerk trembled, one hand on the torn chain where her archive key had hung. Before Crown expansion law, ash stakes could call the last lawful ridge witness when royal measure was disputed. "A dead practice," Cauldron snapped. "Repealed." "Buried," Brinna said. "Not repealed." Cauldron's eyes found hers then, and all his polish thinned into something narrow and afraid. There it was. Not fear of her anger. Fear that she knew the old procedure. Brinna pressed her ash-stained thumb to the paper, then to the ridgestone plate beneath the words, "Reserve void. No crown load." The stone answered. A line of black ash rose from the carving and wrapped around her thumb like a ring. It did not glow beautifully. It looked like dirt remembering a hand. Soren stared at it. "What did you do?" "Invoked a witness hold." Cauldron's face changed. "She cannot." "She can," Mistress Hale whispered, "if she placed the original stakes before royal removal." Brinna kept her eyes on the crawl. For 1 hour. Palace expansion, rights, pause. Land, survey law, outranks occupancy, title transfer, and dedication privilege. No balcony, noble apartment, or crown hall may claim load until the ground is remeasured. A roar of protest rose from the Western families. Cauldron lifted his voice above it. "Majesty, if you allow this, she freezes half your palace under servant law." "Underground law," Brinna said. Inside the crawl, stone shifted. Soren dropped to one knee beside the opening, crown and armor lowered into ash where every noble could see. "Tell me where to move the weight." Brinna marked 3 points on the terrace with the torn map. "Brace here, break plaster there. Remove every banner pole from the western balcony rail. They are ornamental load now." A lord shouted, "Those poles hold my house colors." "They are killing the crawl." Soren did not look at the lord. "Tear them down." Men ran. Banners fell. The dragon stair groaned, lifted by a finger's width, and the crawl mouth opened enough for 2 dust-white workers to drag out a boy with blood on his forehead and polished cloths still tied at his belt. Brinna counted him. 33. Soren looked at her then, and something dangerous moved through his face, not tenderness, not relief, but the knowledge that she had saved a life while he was still learning the shape of his own failure. Cauldron saw that too. He stepped behind Mistress Hale and seized the archive key from her broken chain. "Then let us measure properly," he said. Before Soren could turn, Cauldron drove the key into the smoking brass rod. The rod split open, and a folded strip of black ledger paper fell out onto the cracked terrace. Across it, in fresh red ink, was Brinna Vale's dismissal order. Mistress Hale reached for the black ledger strip before any noble understood what had fallen. Cauldron stepped on it. The old clerk stopped with both hands half raised, dust on her sleeves and terror in her mouth. The western wing groaned above them. Somewhere below, workers were still coughing their way out of the lower runs. Yet every eye on the terrace had turned to the paper under the royal surveyor's boot, because fresh red ink could ruin a woman faster than falling stone. Cauldron bent, lifted the strip with 2 fingers, and held it toward the court. By Crown authority, he announced, Brinna Vale was dismissed from Ridge service at 3rd bell. Any stake placed, map drawn, warning issued, or witness hold invoked after that dismissal is unlawful interference with royal foundation. The noble families seized the words like railings. Unlawful, dismissed, interference. Brinna kept her thumb pressed to the ridge stone plate. The black ash ring around it tightened, not painfully, but with the cold grip of procedure waiting to be challenged. Soren did not move toward the paper. His gaze stayed on Cauldron. "Why was her dismissal inside your rod?" he asked. Cauldron's expression was wounded perfection. "Because she was unstable, Majesty. I carried the order in case mercy failed. You saw the result. She rang bells, froze property law, damaged the terrace, and now holds your palace hostage under buried ash custom." A guard captain shifted near Brinna. Soren's voice cut him still. "No one takes her hand from that stone." The command was not soft, it was blade flat. Brinna did not look at him. If she looked, she might feel the weight of almost trust, and almost trust was how women like her lost evidence. Cauldron turned the strip outward. "The king's seal is here. The dismissal stands." Soren finally looked. The red crown seal marked the lower edge. His seal. His mistake made portable, folded into another man's instrument, waiting for the hour it could be used against the only person who had read the ground correctly. A murmur passed through the court. Brinna heard it trying to decide whether she was dangerous again. She extended her free hand. "Let me see the time mark." Cauldron laughed once. "The dismissed do not inspect their own dismissal. The accused inspect time marks under Ash Survey law. You are not under Ash Survey law. You are under Crown discipline. The ground has already chosen jurisdiction." The ash stake struck once against the terrace in answer. Soren held out his hand. "Give me the order." For the first time, Cauldron hesitated in public. Small, fatal. Then he obeyed, because refusal would have been confession too soon. Soren took the strip and read it without changing expression. The wind pressed ash dust against his armor. Brinna watched only his eyes. They moved from the crown seal to the dismissal line to the time notch cut beside the ink. His jaw tightened. "What is wrong with it?" he asked. Cauldron answered too quickly. "Nothing," Brinna said. "The time notch faces west." Soren turned the strip. The court saw nothing. Cauldron saw too much. Brinna continued, calm and exact. "Archive orders are notched east when issued from the crown desk. West notches are field prepared. That order was prepared on the ridge before it was sealed." "That is an old clerk habit," Cauldron said. Mistress Hale found her voice. "No, it is still used." Cauldron's stare could have cut thread. The western wing shifted again, deeper this time. A balcony rail buckled with a metallic shriek. Servants dragged 2 more workers from the south crawl, while shield-bearers braced the dragon stair with their shoulders. Soren looked from the trapped workers to the dismissal strip in his hand. "Prepared before I sealed it," he said. Brinna felt the court hear the difference. Prepared meant plan. Sealed meant king. Cauldron bowed his head with grave control. "Majesty, emergency orders are often prepared in advance for your approval. That is efficiency, not conspiracy." "Then why hide it inside a rod?" "To protect it from her." Brinna looked at him then. "From my numbers. From your obsession. From the time mark." His mouth tightened. The ash ring on her thumb darkened. The ridgestone plate beneath her hand gave a low, grinding pulse. Not collapse. Recognition. Cauldron seized the moment before it hardened against him. "Majesty, if this witness hold remains, the Western families will claim unlawful seizure. If you honor her procedure, your crown admits that a servant's stakes outrank royal expansion. End this now. Order her thumb cut from the hold, and the palace returns to your command." The court inhaled. Soren's eyes went black with dragon heat. Brinna did not flinch. She looked down into the crawl mouth where a worker's hand was still reaching through dust. "No," she said. "If he cuts my hand, the hold breaks. If the hold breaks, the false load returns. If the false load returns, the western wing slides." Soren stepped between Cauldron and the ridge stone plate. Then no blade comes near her. Cauldron's polished grief vanished for one heartbeat. Beneath the palace, a sound rolled from west to east, long and hollow, like a mountain deciding which lie to crush first. Mistress Hale stared at the dismissal strip in Soren's hand. "Majesty," she whispered, "there should be a countersignature." Soren looked down. There was none. Cauldron moved. Not toward Brinna this time, toward the south furnace crawl, where the last workers were still trapped beneath the load line. A shield-bearer saw Cauldron first, but he saw him through dust. That was enough to make the man hesitate. Cauldron reached the south furnace crawl with his brass rod split open in Soren's hand and his dismissal order exposed behind him. Yet he moved like the only lawful man on a breaking mountain. He seized the nearest mason by the shoulder and pointed to the braces under the dragon stair. "Move those supports to the western rail," he ordered. "The servant has loaded the wrong throat." The mason froze. Brinna's voice cut through the ash. "Do not touch them." Cauldron turned, grateful for the contradiction. There. She would rather keep her old ritual perfect than save the trapped workers. A cough scraped from inside the crawl. Then a second. Soren stepped toward the lower stair. The cracked terrace shifted under his weight, and the burning stakes struck stone in warning. "Stop," Brinna said. He stopped, not because she had power over him, because the ground had answered her first. "Your armor is too much on that line," she said. "Stand east of the stair. If you cross, the throat drops." A ripple moved through the nobles. The Dragon King, halted by a dismissed measurewoman in front of his own palace. Cauldron took the ripple and sharpened it. "Majesty, hear what this has become. She commands your steps. She freezes your wing. She declares noble property void. Now she decides which royal weight may stand where." Brinna looked at the crawl mouth. 3 trapped. 1 small. 2 grown. "How can you know that?" a noblewoman demanded. Breath spacing. Soren heard it then. 1 high cough, 2 lower ones, uneven and weakening beneath stone. Brinna took 1 ash stake from the ground. The red cord snapped loose and wrapped around her wrist. The remaining stakes flared, but the black ring on her thumb thinned against the ridge stone plate. Mistress Hale whispered, "If you lift your hand, the witness hold weakens." "I know." Cauldron smiled softly. "Then choose. Keep your illegal hold and let them die, or leave it and prove your authority was nothing but theater." Soren's hand tightened around the broken rod until smoke bled through his gauntlet. "You set that trap." "I named the law," Cauldron replied. "She is the one pretending to own it." Brinna did not answer either man. She pressed the torn ash paper into Mistress Hale's trembling hands. "Hold this flat to the plate. Do not argue with anyone. If the ash goes gray, say so. I am only a clerk. You remember impressions." Mistress Hale swallowed and placed both hands over the map. The ash ring on Brinna's thumb cracked. The western wing groaned, and every balcony line shuddered downward another inch. Soren turned to his captains. "All nobles east, workers through first. Anyone who claims blood right over tunnel breath loses my protection." A marquis shouted, "Your protection? This woman is stripping our titles while your palace falls." "My palace is falling because I let men praise it faster than they measured it." The words landed brutal and bare, not apology. Confession to the air, made useful by command. Brinna felt them strike her, but she did not keep them. There was no time. She slid down beside the crawl mouth and drove the ash stake into the cracked seam. "Merrick, if that is you, answer with 2 taps." "Nothing." She waited 1 breath. 2 taps came back, faint as insects inside a wall. "Good," she said. "I am coming through the cold side. Do not crawl toward oil. Cover the child's mouth with cloth." Soren stepped down 1 pace. The stake slammed hard enough to chip stone. Brinna looked up at him through ash. For the first time all morning, fear crossed his face without armor. "You cannot fit," she said, "and your heat will light the oil. I can break the stone. If you break the wrong stone, you bury them." Cauldron lifted his voice to the court. "Majesty, if she enters that crawl with an ash stake and the workers die, Every witness here will say she carried forbidden ridgecraft into a royal foundation. Soren did not look at him. If she enters, and they live, every witness here will remember who tried to stop her. Cauldron's eyes went flat. Brinna tied the red cord around her wrist, looped the other end around the broken seam, and pushed herself into the crawl. The space took her shoulders first, then her hips, then the hem of her ash-stained dress. Stone pressed close. Oil stung her throat. Behind her, Soren ordered, "Hold that line. No one touches the clerk, the map, or the stake." Cauldron's reply came smooth and low. "Then pray she knows the mountain better than she knows obedience." Brinna crawled forward until the terrace light vanished. Ahead in the dark, a child whispered, "The wall is moving." The ash stake in Brinna's hand went cold. Then the crawl sealed behind her. Darkness closed around Brinna in layers of stone dust and oil stink. She did not turn back. There was no back now. The crawl mouth had sealed behind her with a low crush of rock, and the last ribbon of terrace light had vanished. Above her, the dragon stair carried too much weight. Below her, the mountain gave small, sick tremors, not large enough to collapse everything at once, only enough to remind her that every breath was borrowed. "Do not move toward me," she said into the dark. The child answered with a thin cough. One of the men whispered, "Miss Vale? Marek?" "Yes." "How many with you?" "2, me and Jessa's boy." Brinna pressed her palm flat against the crawl floor. The stone pulsed wrong beneath her left hand, hollow and warm. Beneath her right, it stayed cold. Cold was Old Ridge. Warm was Palace Load forced where it did not belong. "Put the boy behind you," she said. "Face him toward the cold wall. Cover his mouth. The wall is closing." "No," Brinna said. "The stair is settling. There is a difference." Her own words came back to her from the terrace, sharpened by darkness. Difference mattered. Difference was the space between living and buried. The ash stake in her hand had gone cold from tip to cord. She dragged it along the crawl wall. In the black, the charred point left a dim gray line. Not flame, not magic beautiful enough for nobles, just ash remembering pressure. A stone popped above her shoulder. Brinna stopped. She listened. Not to screams outside, not to Soren's command muffled beyond the collapse, not to Cauldron's voice, which still tried to cut through stone with law. She listened to the mountain breathing through cracks smaller than thread. There, a narrow pull of air touched her cheek from below the right wall. Old drainage seam. "Can you crawl 2 body lengths toward my voice?" she asked. "The boy cannot." "Then slide him." "He is bleeding." "Slide him anyway." A frightened little sob answered, then the scrape of cloth over stone. Outside, beyond the sealed mouth, Soren's voice carried through the ridge. "Hold the nobles east. No one crosses the west line." Cauldron's reply came thinner, but still polished. "Majesty, if she dies inside that crawl, the court will call this proof of forbidden ash practice. She entered because your ledger lied. My ledger has not been opened." "Then survive long enough to see it opened." Brinna shut the voices away. She reached the drainage seam and dug the stake tip into it. The ashwood hissed, drinking old damp from the ridge. The red cord around her wrist tightened until it cut skin. Good. Pain meant the stake had found pull. She wrapped the cord twice around her forearm and braced her knees against the crawl floor. "Merrick, when I say now, push the boy toward the cold draft." "What about you?" "I am not the load line." Another stone cracked overhead. This one dropped dust into her mouth. Brinna spat soot and drove the stake deeper. The wall answered. A strip of plaster and false mortar peeled from the crawl side, falling away in chunks. Behind it, black ridgestone showed through, carved with a small old mark, 3 ash notches above a hollow square. Brinna went still. It was not just a warning plate. It was a transfer point. Someone had not merely built over empty ground. Someone had moved the palace's weight through a hidden worker wall, using the south crawl as a throat for the western wing. That was why the workers were dying first. Her numbers had been right, but not cruel enough. "Merrick," she said. "Now." The man pushed. The child slid through dust toward the cold seam, whimpering once before Merrick's hand covered his mouth again. Brinna leaned her full weight against the stake and pulled the red cord across the hidden mark. Ash cut through old lime, the hollow square filled with black. Above her, the dragon stair groaned. Outside, the ash stakes on the terrace struck stone again and again. Mistress Hale cried out, "The map is changing!" Cauldron's voice sharpened. "Do not let that clerk touch evidence." Soren roared, "Touch her and lose the hand." Brinna pulled harder. The hidden transfer mark split. For one breath, the western wing's false load tried to return to its purchased path. Heat surged through the crawl. Oil fumes flashed sharp in Brinna's throat. The boy screamed. Then, the old drainage seam opened. Cold ridge air poured in. Merrick shoved the child through first. Brinna caught his belt and guided him into the narrow seam. A second worker followed, coughing blood, then Merrick. The crawl ceiling dropped low enough to scrape Brinna's back. "Miss Vale, Marek rasped, come." Brinna looked at the broken transfer mark. If she left it half-cut, the false load could seal again. Cauldron would call the collapse proof against her. The western wing would stay hungry over hollow ground. She took the torn edge of her ash paper from her bodice, pressed it against the mark, and used the stake's charred tip to write in the dark. Load, reassigned through worker wall, no countersign. The words sank into the ridge stone. The mountain took them. A crack of white ash raced away from her hand, up through the crawl, through the sealed mouth, through the terrace stone above. Outside, the court went silent for a reason older than fear. Across the palace wall, Brinna's words burned into view. Then the sealed crawl opened beneath her knees. The first person to see Brinna again was not Soren. It was the boy with blood on his forehead. He slid from the old drainage seam beneath the eastern buttress, coughing into Merrick's sleeve, then lifted one shaking hand toward the palace wall. Brinna's words were burning there in white ash for every noble, guard, clerk, and servant to read. Load reassigned through worker wall. No countersign. The letters did not glow like spellwork. They looked carved by pressure, each word bitten into marble from the inside. Then Brinna came out after them, shoulders gray with dust, one sleeve torn open, red cord burned into her wrist. She did not stand at first. She braced one hand on the ridge stone, drew breath through the oil sting in her lungs, and counted. 34, she said. Marek collapsed behind her. 35. The rescued boy whispered, 36. Only then did Brinna look toward the terrace. Soren was watching her as if the mountain had returned something he had nearly ordered buried. His gauntlet still held Cauldron's split brass rod. Smoke curled from the broken seam. The hidden override seal pulsed against his palm like a guilty heart. Cauldron recovered before mercy could form. "She wrote that," he said, pointing at the burning wall. "You all saw the result. Forbidden ridgecraft inside royal foundation. She forced her accusation into stone because her paper failed." Brinna rose slowly. "She did not write the first crack," Mistress Hale said. Cauldron's gaze snapped to the clerk. "You have forgotten your office." "No," the old woman said, still trembling. "For the first time today, I remember why it exists." The ash stakes lifted from the terrace and turned, not toward Brinna, but toward the black-bound registry table beneath the dedication canopy. The table had been dressed in silk for ceremony. Now ash dust crawled over the cloth in a straight line, pointing to an empty space where the Western construction ledger should have rested. Soren saw the space. "Bring every expansion registry," he ordered. "Eastern, Southern, Western drafts. All of them." Cauldron's voice sharpened. "Majesty, opening incomplete registries before noble witnesses will invalidate years of crown planning. Years of planning buried workers under my stare. Your Majesty, open them." Guards ran to the archive doors. Nobles pressed backward, as if paper had become more dangerous than falling stone. Brinna crossed to the burning boundary line. Her knees wanted to fold. She did not let them. Not on silk. Soren turned to her. "The registry table is above a false line," she said. "Put the ledgers on ridge, stone." A lord scoffed. "Now she tells the king where books may sit." Soren looked at the man. "She told me where men could live." No one scoffed again. The ledgers arrived in the arms of 3 clerks, all pale, all watching Cauldron, as if he could still erase them by name. Mistress Hale unlocked the bindings with her shaking archive key. Eastern ledger. Clean. Southern ledger. Clean enough to make the stakes dim. Then the Western draft was laid on the exposed ridge stone plate. The ash stakes struck once. The pages opened without a hand. Not to the front, not to the dedication seal. To a middle spread where 3 columns had been scraped thin and rewritten. Original load, reserve void. Assigned, load, royal trust. Countersign, blank. Cauldron gave a controlled breath. Drafting gap. Brinna placed her torn ash paper beside the page. Same mark, same missing countersign, same rod impression. The broken brass rod screamed in Soren's hand. A black imprint appeared on the ledger margin, forced upward by heat. The hollow, centered override seal. Beside it, another mark surfaced more slowly. The crown seal, Soren's seal. The court did not gasp. The sound that moved through them was worse. Recognition without permission. Cauldron stepped toward the ledger. The king approved expansion authority. That is all this proves. Brinna looked at the blank countersign line. No. Expansion authority lets walls rise. It does not let hollow ground pretend to carry them. The western wing shifted again. This time every balcony chain rang at once. Cauldron spread his arms toward the noble houses. If His Majesty accepts her reading, your contracts are ash. Your balconies, apartments, dowries, and titles tied to the western wing become fraud claims. Think carefully before you let a servant's stakes unmake your inheritance. The nobles looked to Soren. That was Cauldron's true weapon. Not the rod, not the ledger. Fear with property papers wrapped around it. Brinna looked at the king too. The load can still be released, she said. How? She touched the crown seal on the ledger without covering it. The seal that accepted false weight must reject it in public. Cauldron went still. Soren understood before she finished. Brinna's voice stayed exact. You must break the dedication decree before the rite completes. If you do, the western expansion loses crown protection. If you do not, the mountain will collect the weight. The dedication bells began to ring above them. Not the evacuation bell, the rite bell. Cauldron smiled at last. Too late. Across the palace wall, the burning cracks bent into one final line. Crown seal required. The rite bell rang again, and 3 noble houses moved toward the ledger. A marquis caught a guard's sleeve. Stop him if he reaches that seal. My contract was witnessed by crown law. Cauldron lifted both hands. Majesty, break the decree and you confess fraud before every family sworn to you. Soren stood with the split brass rod in one hand and the western ledger open before him. The bell's sound came back, warped through the cracks. Brinna stepped to the exposed ridgestone plate. Blood had dried around her wrist. Do not touch the crown seal yet, she said. Cauldron smiled. Now she delays you. If he breaks the decree before the false load is named, the wing will fall without direction. Brinna looked at Soren. Workers clear, nobles east, guards off the west stair. No armor on the diagonal line. Soren gave the commands. No lord dared argue. The families who had laughed at Brinna's stakes now stood where her lines allowed. Second, Brinna said, the ledger must say what the palace hid. Mistress Hale laid the western draft on ridgestone. Brinna pointed to the blank countersign. Read it. The clerk swallowed. Original load, reserve void, assigned load, royal trust, countersign, none. The ash stakes burned brighter. Cauldron's voice sharpened. A missing signature does not equal crime. No, Brinna said. The load line does. She took the broken brass rod from Soren. The metal scorched her palm, but she pressed its hidden override seal against the ledger margin, then against the old ridgestone plate. The mountain answered with a sound like deep teeth closing. Across the palace wall, the burning cracks widened into a map. The sold foundation block, worker wall transfer, western balcony load, all feeding into the same hollow center. Then a name surfaced in ash. Cauldron Voss, royal surveyor. Rod impression, accepted, no countersign. The court saw it before Cauldron could hide. He stepped backward. That proves procedure, not intent. Soren looked at him. Procedure buried men under my stair. It saved your expansion. It sold mountain ground that was never yours to sell. Cauldron's face hardened. And you sealed it. Remember that, before you make me the only guilty man here. The words struck clean. Soren did not deny them. He removed his crown. Dragon kings did not bare their heads before ledgers, servants, or broken stone. Soren set the black ridge iron crown beside the western draft. My seal accepted false weight, he said. Cauldron stared in triumph, thinking confession was collapse. Soren placed his bare palm over the crown seal. Dragon heat rose through his skin. Smoke twisted around his wrist. The smell of burned blood joined cold soot. Brinna stepped once toward him, then stopped herself. He did not ask her to comfort him. "By Dragonstone Crown," Soren said, each word roughening as the seal burned into his palm. "I break the Western Dedication Decree. I withdraw crown protection from every load assigned over Reserve Void. I return final measure to Ash Survey law until the ridge is remeasured by lawful witness." The seal split. The western wing screamed. Then the load released. Not as collapse, as surrender. 3 noble viewing rooms cracked from false supports and slid down in sheets of glass and marble, crashing into the empty drop beyond the cleared line. But the dragon stair held. The worker wall held. The people east of Brinna's boundary lived. When the dust thinned, the ash stakes were no longer burning at Cauldron's Rod. They had turned toward Brinna. One by one, they sank into the ridge at her feet, forming a clean boundary line between Palace Stone and Mountain Truth. Mistress Hale read the new words appearing in the ledger. "Land, survey law overrides palace expansion rights until true ground is restored." Caldron ran. He made it 3 steps before the split brass rod rolled across the terrace and stopped against his boot. The hidden seal flared black. Soren did not chase him. "Take him alive. Every contract carrying his rod impression goes to public audit." Guards seized Cauldron as the noble families recoiled from him. Soren turned to Brinna before he turned to the court. His burned palm hung open at his side. "Brinna Vale placed the original stakes lawfully," he said. "She counted the workers I failed to see. She held the ridge when my seal held a lie. From this hour, no palace stone moves on Dragonstone Ridge without her measure." The murmur began with servants, then workers, then clerks. It reached the nobles last. Soren picked up the crown with his unburned hand, but he did not put it on. He stepped behind Brinna and placed the black-bound ledger before her. "Write the first correction," he said. Brinna looked at the pen, the broken western wing, and the workers alive below. She wrote one line: "Reserve void remains void." The ash stakes bowed into the ground. Only then did Soren speak quietly enough that the court could not use it as theater. "I will spend the rest of my reign proving I heard you." Brinna did not forgive him for the crowd. She did not take his burned hand. But she looked at him and saw a king standing behind the truth instead of in front of it. "For now," she said, "measure first." Soren bowed his bare head. "As you command." At Brinna's feet, the mountain went still.